Hello, everybody, and
Hello.
welcome to Coffee Class. Adam, you're muted.
I said hello, everybody.
Oh, man. If we missed that, we would have been off to a terrible start.
Thank God we're starting okay.
So welcome to Coffee Class with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie. This is Adam. And Avi. I can never get... You all should just wave. That would really avoid the whole...
Yes, yeah, let's stop the pointing
Alexie,
thing.
Adam.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it's
it's
easy
easy
for
when
you.
you're on the bottom. But anyway, so today we're going to be breaking down Short Term 12. And unfortunately, John is on the road and said, I hate your favorite movie, Alexie, and I won't watch it and I won't be there. And unless he magically shows up to say I'm wrong, that's going to be the story.
Is this how you summon him?
Yeah, and then he appears from nowhere. So if you check...
No. You only summon him when you start talking about the third man.
Or Casablanca.
Casablanca.
I don't even think John likes Casablanca that much. I feel like it's half of it's just like he's been conditioned to say it's brilliant.
It's Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Casablanca Syndrome.
So what did you all think of Short Term 12?
Yeah.
Avi and Alexie. And then I'll go to myself.
Well,
In what order?
Let's go Avi.
okay.
I loved it. I had never seen it before. There was one scene that people have sent me in the past. So I knew about the story with the shark and the octopus. And I knew that I was going to have to see this movie eventually. And, you know, thanks to Alexie, I finally seen it. And I was impressed with it in general. Am I going in and out? Because
You were for
in
it.
and out.
You were
I can
for
hear
a
you.
second, but it's mostly good.
Okay. I can't trust my eyes. I was really impressed with it, like both as a, in terms of the character studies, we really get to know each of these people and really care about them and, the world of it, obviously, but also so many lovely little moments that don't necessarily like serve a larger function, but really stick with you because they feel honest and real. And you don't necessarily expect them, but once you watch them, they really kind of hit your heart in a certain way. So that, like, I don't know, I'm excited to talk about this movie. What about you, Alexie? I mean, I'm curious, like, to hear your gushing remarks about this film.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously my favorite film, which is why I chose it. I like it more than Winter's Bone. So there is that. And it was also recommended to me for the stories within a story aspect. Because I was writing a script that was also really depressing and also had stories within stories. And then someone in my class, like sophomore year, was like, you should really watch this movie. And then I watched it and it was super emotional and hard to watch. And I was shook. And I've seen it a few times since. And I feel like this was the first time I got to watch it and not have like emotional responses to it all and just pay attention to the narrative. And then also realize how famous all these people are now, which is wild. Like, I got obsessed with Brie Larson after this. And then, fortunately, like when I got obsessed with Jennifer Lawrence, she got to do more stuff. So it was a very fortunate obsession. But yeah, all of them.
You're a career maker.
I am. It is my secret obsession, which makes someone a star.
You're a talent spotter.
I am good at finding specifically women in like indie films that I'm like, I'm obsessed with you. I'm obsessed. And then a few years later, they're like Brie Larson or Jennifer Lawrence.
We need a category of actress. It's Alexie's Dirty Blondes.
Yes.
Like there are 2 entries so far, and I'm curious who else. Like by the time we're at episode 100, like how many others will Alexie have discovered that would just like explode? Who happen to be Dirty Blondes?
Well, you know that. Oh yeah, they are Dirty Blondes. Well, then again, though, Caitlin Dever, Jaden in this one, I circled back to her like a few years ago and was like, who was that? Because she was really good. And she'd be like more grown now. And then she wasn't doing anything yet. And I was like, that's a friggin' bummer. And then now she did like Booksmart and Unbelievable and all this amazing stuff. And she's going to be a boss too.
She wasn't
You
book
watch.
smart.
Yeah.
Ah,
You watch. She's going to be a boss.
this director's going places also.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed his most recent film, Just Mercy. Michael Jordan. It's great.
Michael G. Borden.
No, Michael G. Borden. Michael G. Borden. Oh my God. Sorry guys, I have a little bit of a what's the term? Foggy brain.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Not enough
sometimes
coffee?
sometimes you just wake up and you've slept too much, and then like that haze follows you the rest of the day. Michael G. Borden.
That's just normal. that's just their baseline.
See, I guess I'm just so high functioning all the time that like when I like live like you guys, it's like feels like really shocking all of a sudden, you know.
when you don't get your spring water, this starts.
When I
to
don't
happen.
get my spring water. For those who don't know, I drink exclusively spring water.
Not even
from a
kidding.
local spring. Yeah.
Great choice.
I don't know. It's really fun to like go to like this weird little shack and put quarters in a giant machine, and then water gushes out into your big bucket. It's really fun. I don't know. I recommend it if you have.
You
one
put
around.
a quarter in? I thought you like use the plunger thing. You know.
No. So it's a well. It's not like a well. It's like there's like a little dispository. It's kind of interesting. You could there's like 5 like machines, and the spring water comes gushing out. It's interesting. Anyway, great movie.
Yeah, we were doing this. We were doing this in place of a John anecdote while everyone.
I'm just talking about my my life. But I have to say, like, this is one of those movies you can just tell, like, was elevated by the sensitivity of the performances, elevated by like the director's collaboration with the actor. Like, this was like a really thoughtful. Every scene you could tell was rehearsed in like the good way, not over rehearsed. Like they really, I don't know. I really liked all those small little human, like, you know, those directors who like do backstories with the actors. I just had the feeling that this was one of those. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah, it was based on a short, and by the same name, and all the actors are different except for what's his name? Oh my gosh, Lakeith. I forget his last name, but he played Marcus.
Stanfield, yeah.
Yeah. He's the only one who came back. And according to IMDb trivia, he had quit acting and didn't have a cell phone, so they had to track him down and pull him back in. And then now he's here to stay with a fabulous performance in Get Out.
Wow.
Okay.
And many other things. So
yes.
So I guess I should.
Let's go into it.
Yeah. Okay. One sec. Let me figure this out. Okay, so if you check the description in this video, you should find a PDF of the tentpole beats for the films, this is my breakdown, which I don't necessarily know is correct, so that's why we're going to talk about it. But yeah, okay, so this movie is about a woman named Grace who is in her 20s. And she's a care worker at a group home for children. And the facility is called Short Term 12 because kids are there short term, and it's the 12th, I suppose. So her big flaw is that, in my opinion, is that she can't talk about her past. She can't talk about her father specifically, but she can't talk about her past. So her ordinary world is that this is a care facility for children. She's there with a bunch of famous actors. She's there with, Rosa. Anyway, so she's there in this facility. There's a bunch of kids that come through that are struggling with different things, have different backstories. And she also works with her long-term boyfriend, Mason. So then one day, the new girl, Jaden, is coming to the facility, and she is positioned as just like a girl who is trouble, but has a good life. Like that, this is just sort of, wow, why is she acting out? We don't know, which is annoying. But anyway, this is where I think that my analysis of it might get a little different than what I assume was even intended with the script. but I think it's how the movie ended up. The inciting incident, as I see it, is that Grace confirms she's pregnant. And almost immediately, we get the hint that this is the second time she's been pregnant. It's something upsetting. We don't know why. And then her call to action moment is she just immediately schedules an abortion for Saturday. So now, in my mind, her objective is get the abortion. And that puts us into Act 2. I could think that the Jaden character is her mentor. Because her inner need is basically to believe in herself enough that she can start a family. In, again, my controversial analysis. But in this new world, she's pregnant and she knows it, and she's planning to get rid of the baby, or planning to end the pregnancy. And Mason, her long-term boyfriend, who's just a good guy, this makes him her antagonist, which is an interesting dynamic. So there's a bunch of obstacles, just things that make her life more, that make things more difficult for her to get the abortion. So, for example, she tells Mason she's pregnant, and he's super, 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 super stoked, which is, why he's an antagonist, because, he doesn't know that her objective at that point is to end the pregnancy. There's a bunch of just other interactions, and I think that this comes back to what Avi was talking about, that we have these scenes that aren't necessarily part of the core story engine, but are so much a part of the world that it doesn't feel like we're going down these, like a tangent. So we see more that she's struggling with something that we haven't talked about. When she tries to hook up with her boyfriend, she ends up hitting him in the face, like panicking and hitting him in the face. Meanwhile, she's bonding with Jaden and trying to figure out what's going on with this girl. And when Jaden has a big blow up, she ends up telling Grace's story that Grace believes means that she's being abused, and she writes a report on it, and she thinks that that's going to help her out. Then at the midpoint, I consider the midpoint to be a mash of two events. Mason asks Grace to marry him, and basically in the same page, we also find out that her dad is going to be released from prison. And if we've seen the movie, we know that her dad getting released from prison has a big impact on her comfort with this pregnancy and her ability to talk about what happened to her and things like that. So this is a huge setback. She has like a panic attack, and her new world after this point forward is that like one of the worst things that could happen to her is happening, and now she's committed to being with Mason. Then a bunch of other things happen that are sort of not about that necessarily, but are about just obstacles that she's running into that are stopping her from getting where she's going. Marcus, one of the kids there, his fish dies and he attempts suicide. And the guy who runs the short-term facility didn't believe Grace's report that Jaden was being abused. And Jaden goes with her father, who Grace believes is abusing her. After Marcus is rushed to the hospital and it's unclear whether or not he will make it, Grace is having sort of a panic attack in the parking lot, and Mason is trying to get her to open up. And she has this moment where she just keeps telling him, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And really the more he pushes, the more she decides she can't do. So, pro tip, don't do that if someone's having a panic attack. Anyway, so this big fight with Mason, she can't tell him what's going on inside her head. She tells him that she won't marry him and she won't have his baby. So that's her ultimate test. And then her inability to talk about what's happening with her means that she's going to achieve her objective, which is one of the two outcomes of the ultimate test that we've talked about. Either their flaw means that they're going to get an objective that doesn't like flow with their inner need, or their flaw means that they're not going to get an objective that does fit their inner need. So for her, her flaw makes it so she is going to get this objective, but it's not what she really wants or needs. So then now we're in Act 3, and at the very beginning, there's this all is lost moment where she's broken up with Mason. Marcus might die. She's not going to start this family with Mason after all, after she had like a brief little bit of hope. And Jaden is with her dad, who she believes is abusive. So in her all or nothing, she gets on her bike and she starts frantically riding towards Jaden's house. Her final fight, we start with a catastrophic failure, which is that she breaks into Jaden's house with a baseball bat and is going to go murder the dad. So that's the catastrophic failure at the beginning of the final fight. Jaden, who again I believe is her mentor, stops her, and they go talk outside. In that moment, Grace takes the decisive action that she's going to finally open up to Jaden and tell her about her own experiences, about her father and her first pregnancy, which was the result of abuse, and basically that she's pregnant and she's terrified, is what she tells Jaden. And then there's an unexpected success where Jaden finally tells Grace the truth about her own dad and her own situation. And Grace was right. And now they can get her help. So the movie ends shortly after. There's a resolution. Jaden's safe. The guy who didn't believe Grace's report now is, apologetic. There's this really great moment where Grace is with her fiance because they're back together now. And Mason says, Marcus is going to get better. And Grace says, I think I am too, which is great. And then we see that Grace is going to a therapist. She's going to start trying to talk about stuff. And that she is going to start a family with Mason. So that is it. Let's see. And
great job,
thanks.
Alexie.
So, yeah, again, the whole thing about the pregnancy is really being the core of it is something that I think may not have been the intention. But it's the one thing, like the one objective, I think, that really is consistent throughout, and it matches up with all the like ultimate tests and final fights and midpoints and things like that. So that's why I chose to do that. But what do you all think?
I mean, I feel I'm completely in agreement on this because, so many of the incidents that happen in this, even if they aren't necessarily tied together by her goal, like she's not making these things happen, they're happening to her, they all have a very specific bearing on this question that she has of, do I want to be a mother, right? Where at the very beginning of the movie, she's told she's pregnant and she makes the appointment to have the abortion. So we already have that sort of ticking clock and that sort of question, because she has until then to decide otherwise, and it's up to her. And it's a really interesting choice with the character that she is the perfect mom, essentially. She really knows how to care for kids, and she really understands kids, and she understands how to care for abused kids. And then she herself is an abused kid and can't help herself. And even if she's great at taking care of other kids, when it's about herself, she can't really handle it, and she's not sure how to handle it. And everything that happens in this story with these other kids seems to it seems to impact the choice that she has to make and where she's at on that choice in very specific, tangible ways. And I think that's so much of why it works from a structural standpoint. And I think there's something really honest about that also, because I feel like a lot of us give advice to other people that we don't take ourselves, whether it's, like a craft thing or if it's just a life thing, where it makes so much more sense for us to be able to give this advice to somebody else, and it completely sounds natural coming out of our mouths. And then when it's our turn to take our own advice, we struggle with that. And watching somebody have to deal with that in a compressed amount of time that has a limit, I think that's the story. And it works really well. What do you think, Adam?
I mean, that was really well said. The question about, is she ready to be a mother herself when she's already taking care of other people? What does that mean? And like sort of accepting her path, like that's all really, really there. I mean, I watched this for the first time ever without like trying to analyze it. It was like one of those films that's sort of like, oh, I'm gonna be paying attention to the acting.
Yep.
I'm not gonna be breaking this down. But so this super like the idea that the abortion's the objective makes sense to me. Like you can totally superimpose that. I definitely don't think the writer thought of it that way. I just have that feeling that like I'm sure that there was some sort of structure. I just don't think that this exact analysis was how they went in with it, but it's definitely how the film ended up.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of also just sort of a can of worms, sort of the idea of like, okay, we're descriptively analyzing the edited end product, but that might be a disconnect from and we're trying to get screenwriters to be better screenwriters by learning from the end product. But at the end of the day, there's also like this thing of like, well, the writer didn't necessarily put that on the page, if that makes sense.
So something that I agree, and I eventually
I'm saying something coherent. I'm just talking.
No, it made sense.
What language was that, Adam?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Something I want to pull up eventually is the difference between the writer Destin Cretton. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but Cretton. Destin Daniel Cretton.
It's not
Cretton. I don't know. Destin, my friend Destin. He was a Nichols Fellow and wrote a draft of this script that is 96 pages, I think. Let me see. I have it right. Yeah, 96 pages. And it included a lot more detail about each of the characters' backstories. A description of Grace that I thought was kind of unnecessary, where we just say that she's naked and beautiful, which I was a little annoyed by. Actually, I'm going to pull it up on the screen right now.
2013 Man.
Yeah.
Vintage.
Here we go. All right. So this is the original introduction to Grace right there, and that's what bothered me. But I'll just throw that out there.
Naked and beautiful.
Oh, so it didn't start off. I didn't read the script, but it doesn't start off with the story that they're telling.
Nope. It starts off with this like scene that's between Mason and Grace that kind of shows that they're together before anything else happens. And then it introduces everybody at the short-term 12 facility. It like shows somebody wanting, like a kid wanting to see Grace. And Nate's name is Scott. And then we have this story here that Mason's telling. It's a version of the same story that ended up being the new intro for the script. So a lot has changed between this draft, which is the one, again, that he either did or submitted to the Nichols Fellowship, and what ended up being the final script, which is 16 pages shorter, and I think significantly better, in my opinion.
I do love how much dialogue is on the page, though, just personally.
In this one?
Oh, no, in that scene,
Oh, yeah. Let me pull up. I'm going to pull up the other one.
I'm really curious what the development process was when it was still in its script form.
Right.
When there was a draft and it was this well received. Was this the script that he won the Nickel with, or was it what he wrote as a Nickel Fellow?
I think what he won with.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the script that wins the Nickel.
Oops, wrong.
And then it's still, then it's like, this is fantastic. Now we have to develop it. And that's really interesting to me, that it wasn't sort of at the spot where it is now, because you watch the movie and it's so well done. But the thing about amazing films and amazing anything really is it makes it look so easy. It just feels so natural. Like, of course you start with that story.
Right.
But it took time to get there.
Yeah. So this is the new introduction in the script that was actually shot. And Adam, you mentioned part of the process that like a lot ended up being cut. I wonder if this script was something that people put together after the fact, or if this was actually what they shot with, because not a lot I think is missing from this. So
is this a shooting script? I don't think so, right?
It doesn't look like it.
Yeah. So maybe this is just a later, this is kind of hard because there have been instances of like fans recreating scripts for movies. That has happened, but like this movie's small enough where I don't think that would happen.
And this looks like a script. It doesn't look like a transcript.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think
that's interesting.
I think that maybe this was like made to reflect the movie that actually was produced. But yeah, it's much better. And I think that
hi. That's great screenwriting right there. That is
oh, hey, hi, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
So, like, you want to know something? Like, that often will play better with actors than like 3 people having full sentences. I'm not saying that that's great dialogue, but like giving everybody reactions that are like human.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll just the actors will be able to do more with that. I did a play reading a few years ago, and this absolutely throwaway like reaction line got like laughs, like huge laughs, and I was shocked. I was like, "What? Not my jokes weren't funny because it was a comedic play."
It always surprises you.
Yeah, it was the actor. The actor made a way smarter decision than I did. He added like this really interesting vocalization to this one like little O line, and it was the perfect thing. So I don't know. Sorry, it's just sometimes to be aware of that. You know?
And I mean, the fortunate thing is that he gave this scene to Brie Larson and Rami Malek, so the hey, hi is gonna actually not suck because it's Brie Larson and Rami Malek.
I will say I do like that kind of stuff on the page though, because like it's true it does take extra lines that you don't need to waste, and if you're worried about page count, you want to get rid of that. But it varies the rhythm, and I feel like a lot of dialogue, people kind of, you read the script, the lines kind of run the same sort of pace, where people will say their full thought, and then the next person will say their full thought, and back and forth, and it's all these paragraphs. There's something to be said for kind of changing up the rhythm, kind of making it a little bit more freestyle. It's like, oh, here we're just going to say a word. Here it's going to be a little like fumble of a word. Somebody's going to respond with a question, and then we get back on track. And it kind of keeps you on your toes a little bit. It feels a little bit less like a slog, like you're just kind of getting through the end of a read, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I want to circle back to the objective and the antagonist that I identified, which people are welcome to disagree with. So the reason why I chose the abortion as the objective instead of something like connecting with Jaden, or like helping Jaden or something like that, is because in general, when we think about objectives, there's something that is specific. So like helping Jaden isn't necessarily specific because she didn't know what was going on with Jaden. And tangible is a big thing. So when the protagonist reaches the objective, we should definitely know that was the moment that it happened. And that's why I chose the abortion as the objective. And then in terms of antagonist, just like, when John analyzes Up, he thinks that Russell is actually the antagonist to Carl, because he is the character who's most directly in the way of Carl's objective. And so basically that's why I think that Mason is the antagonist, is not because he's a traditional bad guy. The only traditional bad guys in this script are really Grace's father, who's not in it, Jaden's father, who is only sleeping in it, and then arguably Jack, who's the guy who runs the facility and won't listen to Grace. But nobody else is actively getting in her way of the tangible objective, except for Mason. And he's getting in the way by being nice, like when he's like excited about the baby and when he asks to marry her. And sort of to speak to that, I think that Jaden is a great mentor character. She has that line at the very end after the ultimate test where she finally opens up to Grace and she's like, "You're going to be a really good mother." And is just kind of always there pointing out to Grace that she's doing well.
The way I read this movie structurally is it kind of felt like a bunch of short films that have been woven together. and they're all woven together well. Like they play into a central idea that runs through it, and they all every element returns and everything kind of ties up with itself. But I feel like with each of the short films, if you were to edit it down to just that story, it would the answer to this question would be different. Like the story with Lakeith Stanfield, he would be the antagonist in that if the goal is get him through the end of his term here, it's safe and sound, but he's a self-destructive, self-harming person, then that makes him the antagonist of that. Or the story with Jaden, it's like, oh no, Jaden's being picked up by her father and he's abusive and nobody believes it. The goal is save Jaden, the antagonist is the father. But since those are all essentially subplots of this story, I feel like the thing that is the main story of this thing that those all relate back to is what you're saying. It is the story with the pregnancy, because that's what we keep returning to, and that's what everything seems to consequentially affect, I guess. Like every victory or failure seems to relate to how Brie Larson will decide to move going forward. If things are going well with the children, if she's doing well with the children, then then it looks like she might go forward with the pregnancy. When things are going poorly and it doesn't look like there's hope, then maybe she won't. And so it's always that kind of push and pull on her. So that's why I agree. And I think it's an interesting way to pull it, because there's a version of this that would definitely not work, where it just feels like, why do we have 12 different subplots that don't interact with each other and are just kind of running in parallel? But the fact that they affect her in this specific way, and we keep coming back to her and saying, okay, now this has happened. How are you doing, Brie Larson? Where are you at in your arc? So yeah, and by the way, everything does come back. Like every little thing that feels kind of tangential returns.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of why it's so satisfying structurally.
So
also, I just think, sorry.
I was going to ask if you wanted to, because I saw you respond to this comment, so I was going to offer to pull it up. But go ahead.
Oh yeah. So fuck, what was I about to say?
My bad.
Sorry, it wasn't that good. It wasn't that. Sorry. Yeah. G-rated. PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry, guys.
Well, let's pull this up then. So Michael Arndt made a series of really great videos, in case you didn't know, where he's the writer of, he worked for Pixar and he wrote Little Miss Sunshine. He's just very good at writing. And he made some videos where he explains kind of the stuff that he's learned about writing. And in it, he talks about external stakes, internal stakes, and then philosophical stakes. So Brian's question is about that. Speaking to the Michael Arndt videos, could getting the abortion be the external stakes and the internal stakes be saving someone in the way she needed/wanted to be saved as a kid?
Have either of you read Bob McKee's story?
Yeah.
Book about screenwriting?
Yeah.
So, Bob McKee is one of these big screenwriting gurus who you either love or hate or find interesting. And he had this concept of, there's arch plot, which is the kind of stories that we mostly kind of talk about with John, where there you go.
There we go.
Protagonist has tangible goal, must achieve tangible goal, overcome obstacles that are attacking protagonist, etc. And one of his paradigms was the mini plot, which is a smaller. You don't have it? Ah, well.
No, it's over there.
You can have my copy.
Not a real screenwriter, Alexie. But he had this idea of mini plot, which is where the main struggle in the goal is more internal. So here, I feel like this fits where her goal, her big, the big question, thematic question. Did you both mute?
No.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Weird. Yeah, sound has just changed. Okay.
I muted briefly while you were talking.
All the sound is coming from you. Okay, so here, her goal is very internal, right? It's decide what to do with this baby. And I think that the smart thing that this film does is really externalize the hell out of that. And it's done in all these various little ways, because there's all these different children who all have their own different problems, who all kind of relate to her. But the big one that comes closest to home is Jaden, because she is the abused child who is stuck with an abusive father, and Brie Larson's character has that specifically. And I think that's why, number one, why she's in the movie to begin with. She's an externalization of this conflict, but also why her resolution, like all of that, is in the in the climax of the film. Like that is the most relevant to her. That is the most emotionally fraught for her. So that's what we have to build to. How weird would it be if we started off with Jaden and dealing with Jaden and convincing the people who run Short Term 12 that that this girl is being abused, and then kind of just went from there with all the other kids? It wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the reason why it's so great that this is pushed, towards the climax and the thing that we're building towards, is because it is the closest to how, Brie Larson is handling her own issue. Jaden is her. And, I just saw a great short film based on a Stephen King short story. And the short story was very internal. It's about a guy deciding if he should kill himself or not. But he had written a journal full of like crazy bathroom graffiti that he found entertaining, and he realized he has this on him. If he kills himself here, people might think that those were his thoughts, and that somehow they're a key to why he killed himself, and it's not accurate. And he felt like that would be bad. And it's a great short story, but it's very internal. And the way this short film externalizes it is there's a man that he sees at one of these truck stops who is writing this graffiti, and this guy just keeps showing up in the story like as a figment of his imagination to externalize these thoughts and actually have these conversations. Like that's kind of what you have to do in a movie. You have to figure out how to take this internal thing and put it on the outside. The Brie Larson story from this movie in a novel could just be her dealing with this trouble.
Yeah.
But this is a movie, so how do you show that? Well, she has to rescue an abused child from an abusive father, so she can do that for herself.
Yeah. McKee, man.
I have to say, just because I really just have a lot of opinions about Robert McKee. First of all, he's a gigantic asshole.
He's a douche.
He's a real douchebag. And like that's saying a lot compared to all the other big screenwriting guru guys. Like John Truby's an asshole, but Robert McKee's a motherfucker.
And
sorry for all that.
Don't get me started on John Warren.
Oh, John Warren, yeah.
The worst of them all.
But what I do really appreciate about Robert McKee is that he was the first of those guys to actually have an internally consistent book that was really well thought out. Like I know people love, Sid Field and everything, but like there are like lots of plot holes. I mean, not to say that not plot holes, but like McKee's theory, while it's really kind of cumbersome and I don't think he explains it, I don't think he explains like scene work really well. He's really got like a philosophy down, and I appreciate that. You might not agree with everything he says and it might not connect, but like, the guy's got great one-liners.
You can take him or leave him, but what I do appreciate about him is he doesn't just say here are the rules and they are consistent in great films. It's here's the psychology behind them and here's what you risk by trying a different route,
which is great.
Yeah, but if you read the book, be aware that there are some passages in it where I was like, no, Robert. Not okay.
He's very full of himself.
And it was like very sexist and problematic at a few key parts.
In the 90s too. So like it was totally no filter. Anyway, this is a great question.
Yeah.
What did you think about the choice of the writer-director not to include an abuse scene in a film about abuse? My immediate thought is it was what made the film really connect. This isn't a film about abuse, actually. It's about the emotional repercussions and how do you build yourself back up again. And if they showed an abuse scene, it would completely derail the tone and sensitivity of the film, in my opinion. Like, I think they chose the exact right focus, and the reason they did was because it wasn't what the story was about, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's like why I like the film so much, is that except for Marcus, we see the aftermath of violence and we see like the kids freaking out, but not in like a, typical violence way. There's no like on-screen abuse. And I think that that's really important, because like Adam said, it's about the aftermath of it. It's about how it affects people and how it's affecting Grace in particular. And I'm just glad that they didn't put that on screen, because I think, it was very effective. Like we didn't need it. And part of that, I think, is because the actors, and which I guess is also the directing, was good enough that we understood that these people were dealing with a lot without showing it. Something that I want to share.
I have a thought on this question also.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple thoughts. Unless you were still on this thought, I thought you were transitioning.
Oh no, I'm pulling up the script, because in the original script, I was going to show that basically the writer, had originally included a lot of things about each of these characters' backstories that I don't think added anything to the script. I think like letting us learn about it naturally, or like not learn about it at all, was much stronger. Like they said, each of the kids' stories. So like Marcus's rap was a lot more explicit, and also that got changed by Lakeith himself. He wanted it to reflect his own experiences. But like, for example, Sammy, the Sammy character, he has a really awful backstory that was in the script that just never shows up. And then right here in this scene with the nurse in the very beginning with Grace, the nurse immediately is like, oh man, you shouldn't have had to deal with that at 14. Is your dad still in prison? I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And Grace gets mad. But like, we reveal everything at the very beginning. And I think it doesn't work.
Yeah. I think it's really difficult to justify depicting abuse and rape and whatnot on screen, in part because they have such strong psychological repercussions that come through when you meet these characters, that it feels redundant. And also in part because it's difficult to really frame the point of view, it's a lot of times I feel scenes of abuse and rape on screen, you're just watching violence and you're not necessarily empathizing with the character. You might feel bad for them because of course they're being brutalized, but you're watching violence and it's choreographed, and it's, and by not showing that in the film, it looms a lot larger in our minds than if we were just watching actors choreographed mimicking an awful thing in a gratuitous way. And that's the point of it. These characters are still, suffering, even if they're not being physically abused. And if you're watching them and you're watching them being physically abused, and then you watch the aftermath, you might think in the aftermath of well, it's not happening anymore. And I think that it's important to show it is consistently happening. So that needs to kind of be the frame of reference. But also, we're watching the movie through the point of view of the counselors, right? If we cut away from the counselors to a child being abused by a parent, and the counselors are nowhere nearby for this, we're taken out of the story. We're watching this world through the point of view of people who are coming into it, who have to meet these children and figure out what their needs are and meet those needs. We don't get to be omniscient here. So it's a worthwhile thing to consider. What's the point of view that you're taking with the story, just kind of in a literal standpoint? Whose eyes do we watch this through?
Also, just one little note, building off of that, Jaws is better because they don't show the shark, don't show the shark.
Oh, that really works for this one.
Do show the octopus.
Yeah, show the octopus.
Please don't.
Sad octopus.
But yeah, I mean, things are always a lot bigger and worse in our minds if we don't see it, because our imagination, we can take it to whatever the most insane version that we can create in our heads that scares us the most. And then if you watch it, what's effective to some people won't be effective to others, and then it's concretized. And
the other thing too is I think that people are inclined to put it on screen because they think that that's the only way to convey how bad it is. But if you treat it like a horror film where this is a big bad thing, keeping it off screen has a lot of power. But I think people are scared. I think that this writer originally in this first draft didn't trust that like people would be able to fill in the gaps on their own. Like way too much of this original draft, even just down to like talking about what, like there was all this talk about like that's a level drop, like what's your levels, which is basically just like a system for behavior at the facility. But like I'm trying to see where it happened. I guess it doesn't really matter. But in the original draft, he like had this whole long speech where a character was explaining how the levels work. And that's something that I could easily see myself falling into.
But here's
and
the
it just
but
doesn't
Alexie,
matter.
But Alexie, the side note is there's one thing is like, okay, this is a movie and you can convey visual information more clearly. But if you're a script that's going through a competition, you know, like having it on the page, there might be an argument for being a little more explicit if like in the rules of the world and things and certain types of information. And this did get through the Med Nichols, you know.
Yeah.
It was still a great script. I just was saying that, like, I think that, you know,
they cut out stuff for right. You're right that it makes it better without it.
And I think they were correct to cut it, but like, and it's just hard to go from the movie knowing where they ended up and then see all this extra stuff in there, and you're like, no, you don't need that.
Here's an anecdote of a writer friend who, you know, he sold a movie in the 90s, and the studio really wanted things to be made more explicit. Like the characters need to talk about what this movie is thematically about. And, you know, writer protested, but ultimately he had to give in because, you know, it's the studio. So he wrote in a line where a character says, we're playing with matches in God's backyard. And, you know, very cheesy line, but like it did the job, and it, you know, producers signed off on it. On the day of filming, the actor who was supposed to say that line said, I'm not saying that line. And so they cut it. So it's not in the movie, but he has a sort of a maxim now, which is show and tell, because it's true that what you're writing, you know, is going to become a visual experience. But while it's a script, it's a sales document, you know?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to make sure that the people who are signing off on this thing get it. And that might mean sometimes holding their hand a little bit more and then hopefully cutting it out later on if you have that power. And by the way, sidebar about the shark from Jaws. So the father, right, Jaden's father, we only see him once we like stumble into his house. We see him in bed. But before that, Brie Larson says Jaden thinks he's always watching over her shoulder. Like in her mind, he is always there. She can't say anything, fear that he will know it. And that is a terrifying concept of just this omniscient, supermassive, always present, always watching being, right? And that is terrifying. That's how children who are abused feel. If we had met him before that, the whole time that Brie Larson is describing this, we'd just be thinking of a guy. We'd just be thinking of an actor who maybe scowls and does some choreographed violence. And once we meet him in bed, he's pretty helpless. Like we think he's a monster and he's done all these awful things and we want bad things to happen to him. But he's no longer a sort of a grim reaper in every shadow in the room.
And I love that about this, because I think that I also like the choice to not make everything about Jaden's life horrible. Like they could have just made it like that clear. They could have gone with some stereotypes, like made her house really run down and like made it more obvious that something was going on. But I think it was more realistic and better that they chose to emphasize what they did and then kept him hidden. And then in that, like you said, in that one moment, he just looked like a vulnerable guy because Grace was standing over him with a baseball bat. And I think it was a smart writing.
Showing things robs them of their power sometimes. And that was a moment that the story had earned. We are now going to rob this man of his power. And it helps us understand these kids more, you know, if all of their abusers are all powerful phantoms, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just another soapbox moment for a second. You know, like again, on showing versus telling, I feel like a lot of people like misinterpret that you like just what I'll be saying. Like sometimes you have to show and tell. Sometimes you have to understand like the purpose of what you're doing. And like sometimes exposition is actually a really good thing. Basically, you need to convey a certain amount of information for things to be meaningful. And asking yourself the question of, okay, I need the audience to understand this piece of information, that this person's dangerous. What is the best way to achieve that effect? And sometimes it's telling, sometimes it's showing, but like making that conscious choice rather than arbitrarily being like, I have to show everything has to be an image and I can't have any dialogue. No, sometimes a line of dialogue can be more effective and be like take up less real estate on the page. I mean,
yeah, and kind of piggybacking off of that, to sort of revise what I said, like you should trust that the reader will understand what you're writing. They'll understand the role. They're smart. They'll get it. You don't necessarily want to trust that they care. Like you can write a really complex world with levels and with a lot of backstories, and it's true that like people will be able to read between the lines and pick things up. You know, they're like even if they might occasionally miss something, like they're literate, like they'll be able to follow. But your job is to convince them that this matters. And sometimes that looks like really just nailing the emotional beats, but sometimes it looks like holding their hand a little bit, and you know, getting them through. It's like, okay, now I see why it matters. Okay, we don't really need to describe that, but I get it now. And then once they make it, you know, it becomes a little bit more evident on set, and it becomes more evident in the editing bay.
I wanted to talk a little bit, if we're okay to move on, to the fact that, like, I mean, this is kind of related to exposition, but in this script, I think part of what makes it so interesting and part of why so many people reference it is because of how well the stories within stories are done and how they're done in so many different ways. One of the obvious ones is Jaden's literal kid story, where she has the shark and the octopus and is really trying to tell Grace what's going on in her own life. But there's also Marcus's rap is another time when we get a story within a story. There is like, there's also the versions where, sorry, I got a little distracted for a second. There's also just like where Grace is telling stuff, like where we're hearing it. There's Mason at the beginning, literally the beginning and the end, literally telling a story to Nate, the new guy. There's just tons of different ways that it happens. And the fact that they change it up and that it's not always just like one person saying, let me sit you down and tell you a story, I think makes it even more powerful. So I pulled it up here just so you could see what it looks like on the page. Jaden's story. So yeah,
it's a great scene.
You know what I love. You know what I love about the stories within the stories in this. There's a reason that they're being told for the characters, right? Like they have, like in this scene with Jaden, she's trying to communicate something that she is generally incapable of communicating. And also she's trying to connect with Brie Larson's character. And this is the way to do that. It's not just kind of, we're breaking the fourth wall here to get a little bit into a story I want to tell. And, you know, sometimes you'll read scripts that do that, but if there's a function behind it, if there's a reason why this is happening for the characters, for the story, beyond just to tell the story, it's always going to land a lot better. I mean, one thing that really hits about this movie is everything in it, all of the interactions feel honest. Like it doesn't just kind of feel like a dramatized, you know, we're trying to recreate the world of at-risk youths that, you know, based on research that we've read. And, you know, it real, like every character in this feels like a real human being. And that comes down to how familiar with this world the filmmakers seem to be, but also how much the characters, like how much the actors seem to understand about their own characters that they're not necessarily saying. And also the reasons why they say what they say. It's always driven by something about them. It's not just because we feel like in this scene, this character must say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
called
think,
good writing, you know?
well, apparently the writer spent some time volunteering in one of these facilities, and that's where the idea originally came
It
from.
shows that this is, you know, it's something that he's intimately familiar with, and not just something that he was excited about from a distance and tried to recreate without actually having a personal understanding of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of beginning writers struggle with when they're trying to, like, you know, pick a subject or start to tell stories, that they don't like earn their authority with the reader. And that's one of the, you know, strengths of, like, you know, really translating a strong lived experience, is that you can sort of bring in those details, those minute, like, moment to moment observations that only come with lived experience, to earn authority and prove to the reader that, oh, that's a thing I'd never thought of before. You know, everyone has their idea of what it's like to, you know, work anywhere, right? But when you have lived experience, when you have research, you don't have to live experiences to write about characters, but
Yeah.
but you know, having an awareness that you need to earn the authority with the reader, like their perception of you is like, you know, who the fuck are you? Sorry, I'm swearing a lot.
Yeah. It's because John's not around. You gotta pick up the slack. He swears like a sailor. But yeah, I mean, like, even in stories where you don't necessarily have that personal, like, you know, authoritative knowledge from first-hand experience, you know, you want to make sure that you understand why characters do what they do, say what they say. There's always a reason for it, and you read a lot of things where you kind of feel like this isn't motivated, it's happening because the writer feels like this should happen because, like, you know, and that could totally have happened in this kind of script where it's like, we are creating abused children, and there are stereotypes about abused children and what abused children do, and this could have been complete, you know, chock full of that. Instead, you completely understand each child, even if you don't know their full backstory. You understand what is driving them to act in a certain way. And, you know, even if you don't have that, you know, first-hand experience, that's something that we can learn to do as writers. Just make sure that everything is motivated.
Honestly, so I think that that's part of why I'm trying to find where it is. Part of why the original script didn't work as well for me, and why the final version did. Because when the writer tries to make every single story so clear and so tragic, it like lessens the impact, and then also it starts to feel less authentic when it's all like so explicit on screen.
It's less motivated.
Yeah, like again, I'm trying to find it, but like even like Sammy has this like really detailed backstory in the original script, and I'll find it eventually. But
right. People who are hurt don't necessarily come to spill their guts about it, and people who, you know, have stories that they know the other person knows don't just tell them, here's what you already know. And sometimes we do that in scripts because we need the audience to know these things. But if somebody who is withdrawn, or is meant to be withdrawn or surly because of an experience, who is then completely willing at the drop of a dime to just explain everything about themselves, that pings as inauthentic. It feels like, okay, this isn't for the character's benefit, this is for our benefit. And you never want that. So
real quick, I just want to show you one of the lines that I think was dramatically improved in the in the final version. First off, like I said, the rap here is different. And I think that what we ended up with is more unique. But also, this line from Mason, in the final version, he just says this one. I don't even know what to say. And it's so much better without this first part. It's just 100%. Like, it is so much better. What
did the bard say? Brevity is the soul of wit. It's true.
But I'm glad they figured that out, because if he is supposed to be sort of knocked back by what he just heard, and sort of the content of it, aside from the craft of it, and it's like, oh, this guy just spilled his guts to me about, his deepest, darkest feelings. you don't always know how to respond to that, and to say like, oh, incredible, iconic, wonderful, fantastic, I don't know what to say. It's like, no, you know what to say. You just said it all.
Yeah.
Just something I want to address in the chat is sort of the definition that we're using for antagonist doesn't mean like villain. It just means the character who is in the way of the protagonist's objective. So the character who creates conflict as the protagonist pursues their tangible objective. An antagonist just is all it means is it's the force that works against the protagonist. Doesn't necessarily have to be, the evil villain who's like working in the shadows. In this film, Alexie's take was that the antagonist was Mason because he was the only force for pushing back on her idea to get an abortion. He wanted to start a family with her. She wasn't ready. That's the core conflict of the film in terms of screen time. Yes, the dad is a antagonistic force in her past, but not like, if you actually look at the movie, it's about her and her autonomy. He's not actually really a factor. He doesn't really do anything in the film that presents an obstacle for her.
So I think that there's a version in which you could analyze this so Grace is her own antagonist, and
I was going to say that.
Right, for sure.
Where like Grace's experiences with her father have like created the situation in which she's her own antagonist, because that like memories of that experience are holding her back. A movie that John always references that does
Flight.
Yeah, you knew where I was going before, because John has his go-tos. But yeah, Flight has a good example of a protagonist being their own antagonist. It's hard to pull off.
Right. I think upon discussion, I do think that she is her own antagonist in this, because it's true. Like, if Mason weren't there, her choice would be easier, but she would still be faced with that choice. Do I have the abortion or not? And the only reason she wants to have the abortion isn't because of a variety of reasons that you'd want it. It's because of this particular trauma in her past and her inability to like confront that. If it was like any other reason, I don't really think that she would be her own antagonist. If it's like, I'm just not ready to be a mom, or I'm not financially in a place to be a mom, or, there's a medical issue. Like, but the fact that I don't want to do this because this is triggering to me because of this experience, but I do want to do this because it would make me happy and I'd be good at it. Like, that conflict, I feel, is an internal conflict. It's externalized because Mason is there to play, devil's advocate, essentially.
Right.
But it's still her devil.
So I think that so that's where you have to decide if that's just her character or if that is actually the active antagonist in the screenplay. Like, where if that's like her flaws, which is how I put it, was that like this is like part of her flaw and her need. The thematic question, all of that mess is kind of where I had that backstory. Let's see. Veronica asked, what obstacles does her boyfriend Mason make? And so if I'm only looking at obstacles in terms of what is actually like actively stopping her from getting the abortion, I think it's that she's happy about it, or that's about that he's happy about it, that like she obviously cares deeply for him, and she tells him, and he's like, yes, like we can do this, we can have this baby, which is making it more difficult for her to decide to get the abortion, which is what she originally set up in the beginning is what she wanted. Then he proposes to her, and basically just him being good to her and saying like, we can do this, is making it more difficult for her to make that decision. And again, though, that objective is against her inner need. So it doesn't make him a bad character at all. It just means that he's in the way of her objective, which in this case is contradictory to her inner need. So that's that analysis.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it because it doesn't seem to me like he is sort of under duress trying to make her have a baby. Like,
no,
like I don't really feel like
it's soft.
If not, yeah, like if
his proposal does happen at the midpoint, which does create a lot of conflict, right?
Yeah.
It complicates her inner conflict, I feel, because like he pretty much, if he's the antagonist, then there is that point towards the end where he essentially backs off, like, do whatever you want, but I'm done. And then if he's the antagonist, then he kind of wins at the end, doesn't he? He gets what he wants as opposed to what she wants. But it also is what she wants, which is why I feel like
right. But the antagonist doesn't necessarily. In this interpretation that we've taken on for this course for the course, basically, John's interpretation of antagonist is, I think, less about like a agent that has like benefits from the lack of the protagonist getting what they want, but more of sort of like a force of antagonism against the active agency of the protagonist. Like it's a little more neutral.
Yeah,
I agree with it, but it's
I mean, I totally agree. An antagonist is not a villain. An antagonist is something that provides obstacles. I just feel like he represents what she wants, not what she doesn't want.
Well, he represents her inner need, not what she wants, and I think that's what. Like, he is saying the family thing, and that's her inner need, but she's also terrified of that the whole time. And her objective is one that doesn't work with her inner need because she's not ready to accept it until the end when I don't know. So the other thing, though, is that, this script is not necessarily like the prime example for something that's structurally perfect, 100%. And so that's important to keep in mind is that
like I think John would be like, well, if the boyfriend could have been there at the final fight, it would have been a little better.
Yeah, John would want to like try to push more onto it to make it fit the structure harder, but it was written like a very, very like not soft, but what's the word? Like, I don't know. It's just like it's all these beats, none of them really hit you over the head except for the final fight.
Right.
The final fight in the ultimate test.
I'm just thinking about if Jaden represents the trauma that Grace has, and taking care of Grace is dealing with that trauma. There is that scene at the end when they're at the house with the father, and they decide to talk it out and then smash the windows. Jaden says, "You're going to be a great mom," and I feel like that's the moment that she decides. And I feel like that's if she represents Grace. I don't know. I feel like she's, I'm trying to find the words for it, but I feel like that's not Mason. I feel like that's Grace.
Agree. Like, I don't know. I could see that interpretation. It's I think of Jaden less as like a mirror of. I guess obviously their stories are similar to each other, but. I think I saw it less as it's interesting to think of it as like a more direct Grace helping her younger self. I was thinking, I guess, of it more as just like her helping a kid who happens to like bring up these things for her. Like they're connected, but I was imagining it less so maybe.
Yeah, I just felt like of the kids that she has to deal with, Jaden's the one who's the most like directly confrontational for her and therapeutic for her, whereas the other kids, they have different problems than her and she can address those, but dealing with a kid who has her backstory essentially, and feeling unable to rescue that kid from her fate because she's been sent back to that, and like, can you rescue somebody from that fate? Maybe you can't. I have not been rescued. I can't have a kid. Can rescue that kid from her fate. Okay, I can be rescued. I can have this kid. That I feel like those parallels are direct enough that Jaden's kind of an externalized version of young Grace. That's how I read it.
Interesting.
It's a movie that can be read in a bunch of different ways, I feel, but that's the one that's kind of how it stood out to me, and that's why I feel like Grace is her own antagonist here.
For sure. And I just want to sort of say again, I don't think any of us have like the objective perfect reading of this film. This is a very interesting sort of gray area.
I understand this film.
Avi's right.
The only way that it could possibly be understood.
I'm just a confused mess. Avi is like, clear.
Alexie, I don't think you would understand short-term 12.
I don't. You've caught me.
Have you even seen this film?
God, not as many times as Adam has seen Lord of the Rings.
The movie we shan't name. I've seen it a lot. It's a good movie. What can I say? I think it should have been longer.
Yeah.
but no, I completely agree. It can be read so many different ways, and that's part of what's so wonderful about it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a film I'm probably going to watch in like 2 years.
You know what I think is
Again,
fun?
anyway.
I need to ask John, but here is my cocky comment of the day. I'm like 99% sure that he would agree with my breakdown, because it most closely emulates his understanding of structure. Someone brought up, like, I don't think John would agree. I'm like almost 100% certain that John would agree, even if he would say, though, that the objective was weak. Like that she wasn't in active pursuit enough of that objective, right. And that the antagonist should have been more directly in her way, and that we should have seen like more, like that it should have been brought up more. He would critique it on that level, but still analyze it this way. And I think that I wouldn't change those things, but I analyze it this way.
You know what I feel John would say? I feel like we're talking about him like he's dead. Like, do you know what John would say if he were still around today?
I always talk about John like he's dead. To his face.
Like, if Martin Luther King were around here today, like, I feel like if John were, if I'd love to have this conversation with John, because I feel like he would cite it as a great movie that breaks the rules, because it undeniably works. Like, whatever our interpretations of it, 100%. It undeniably works. And like, we all have different personal ways to connect with this story. Like it's kind of kaleidoscopic that way, right? There are all these different elements that could connect more with you directly than other elements. It feels like a really difficult film to have pulled off, and kind of a miracle that they pulled it off.
So for the beginning of next coffee class, I will make John say very quickly what his breakdown of this is. And I have not sent him my breakdown. So we'll see what happens.
Alexie, I have a question for you.
What's up?
Do you think that this movie could potentially make for a good TV show?
It would have to be changed significantly.
Oh no, 100%.
But like, yeah, I mean, they have the whole it's a great setting, because you have a revolving cast of characters where we can follow them for a while, and then also introduce new ones and eventually lose some, and like. Yeah, the setting is perfect for getting into these character stories, and if Brie Larson is up for it, I'll draft something up. But I think it would.
Yeah, I feel like it would make for a decent TV show, just because the sheer number of subplots. Like, I'm amazed that every subplot in this movie wraps up in such a satisfying way.
Mm-hmm.
I could totally imagine following these characters for seasons at a time.
Yeah, I could too. Like, I think it's very well done, and especially if you had a writer's room full of people with different experiences who could, think of characters who are like unique and interact. The relationships are great, and that's what it makes good TV in the opinion that Adam has taught me. You've taught me more. Like, I'd never learned about TV really, like in an official sense. So
I'm not a TV guy. That's just.
But
what I know.
You said stuff that made sense. You were just like, TV is really about the relationships, and I was like, okay, I see that. So that's.
I mean,
the big story.
It sounds good, at least. Yeah.
So here's what about Nate's character? I was wondering the same thing, and that should he have been more fleshed out? I think that he was a great way to introduce us to the world, kind of like the Harry Potter didn't know about magic, so now we're going to go on this. We're going to tell Harry about magic so that we can tell the audience about magic. Nate was a good character for that, and also he created conflict, obviously, and he was annoying, but he did it well.
Alexie, do you think Harry Potter would have been better if it was Larry?
Larry Potter?
I just feel like that has like a ring to it, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just imagine it in print.
Yeah. I could see that. There was a version of, like, they did this like spoof version.
Barry Potter.
It was Barry Trotter was the spoof version, and his scar was a what's it called? The interrobang. It's the question mark on top of the exclamation point. Wild.
Oh, Alexie, sorry, have you seen the AI generated Harry Potter chapter?
No.
I'm going to share this with you. It's the funniest thing I have seen. Like, I saw it last night. So this guy has this this AI that will take he feeds it like the whole Harry Potter series, and then it generates a chapter of the book based on the writing style and the choice of words, and it's the most bonkers thing. I'll share it with you. It's great. Sorry, I'm in a non sequitur mood.
I need to see it.
That sounds like hell.
It's called The Harry Potter and the Handsome One.
Oh
my God.
They even typed it out.
Ooh,
yeah, that's great.
Hot. What was the point of Rami Malek's character? Yeah, I mean, he's kind of Ellen Page from Inception, isn't he? Like, he's this point of view character so that we can sort of be walked in and he can ask questions.
Yeah, he can ask the questions that they otherwise would never need to explain to any of the other people who are already there. And I think he also like represents, like, if we're going to look at it more thematically, he's like coming at this from a position where he clearly doesn't know what he's doing. And he kind of, I think he serves to demonstrate how good at this Grace is. And everyone else is just better at it than him. And it sort of shows that that they're good and that he's not. And this is the Nate character, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he gets to help one of the kids with his subplot.
Yes, he does.
I love that beat where he's told, just tell them no for a few weeks. And then like these kids are like, do you want to play jumper with us? No. That's not what we meant. Those small moments.
He's just so dumb. He's just so annoying. Like, I'm like, come on, man. But it's accurate, though. Like, I saw that in the comments, Theo had mentioned that she worked at a kind of similar facility and that there's always a Nate. And I could imagine that being incredibly true.
It's like, oh, I just wanted to spend my summer, helping underprivileged kids. It's like, you don't tell that to kids.
No. Also, just like, what? Like, check yourself. Oh, Adam, you're not going to share this link in the big chat?
Oh, yeah, I can. Sure. Sorry. I'm in a weird mood today, guys. I'm sorry.
Are you capable of that?
I'm not capable of it. I'm not capable. It stopped me from doing it. All right.
What, sharing in the chat?
I mean, people can Google it. It's fine.
Yeah, Alexie, you can do it. We can't do it.
No, Adam signs in separately and manages to have conversations. I've seen it. I've seen it. Here it is.
Okay.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm excited and scared.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
I will check it out soon.
You know what? As a moment, like just apropos of nothing.
What is it?
Alexie saying?
You said.
Oh,
you cut out for a sec.
Are you one of those people who says saying, apropos of nothing?
Yes, apropos. I do, Adam. Apropos.
Wow.
I don't even know what that means.
Apropos. But
what does that mean?
It means because I don't know. It just.
I thought that apropos was like a shortened version of appropriate, but
apropos, but there's an S at the end.
Appropriates.
It means like without reference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
like about being about nothing.
Yeah, this is entirely a tangent and or not even a tangent. This is entirely just as an aside, a thing that stood out to me in the movie. Just this tiny moment that I can't seem to shake. It's when Jaden escapes the facility and Brie Larson follows her, and like they both know that she can't touch her, but they both kind of understand she's going to keep following her. And we have this sort of wide shot where it's just Jaden walking and Brie Larson kind of following at like a very specific distance behind her. And they're not talking, and it's just the music playing. And I don't know why that moment stuck in my head so, like, visually. Like, I could still see that. Do you have moments like that with this?
I mean, that was a great moment. There's also the moment that I think ended up on some posters where Brie is like on her bike taking Jaden back. And Jaden's holding on to her when they ride a bike. And I think that's another good one.
Because, like, these moments, I feel, are important because you can make a script that hits all the beats specifically. It just does everything that it needs to and is entirely functional. But if it doesn't have these moments that are unique to it, you're not going to necessarily remember it. And the ones that you remember are the ones that have emotional weight, not just sort of visually interesting. And here it's like, I have a shot in my head of Brie Larson is following this kid that she has to take care of, but knows that she doesn't really have power to do that. And Alexie, you have that image of her, on the bike with this kid. So like, it's the emotional beats that kind of breathe on their own that you remember, I feel, more than just the large events.
Let me share this real quick, actually. This is where it ended up. This is all it is. The shot that I like. Grace packs Jaden on her bicycle and they cruise gently down the street. Jaden hugs her from behind.
Two lines.
That's great screenwriting right there.
Mm-hmm.
That is good screenwriting. There's so many beginning writers who would have made that like a full 8-line paragraph talking about the wind in her hair and bullshit.
Yeah. Don't make it feel super important. We'll feel it. Just say what happens.
And I mean, the other advantage of this is that he is directing. The writer is directing, so he can say he knows what this scene means to him. He knows that this is an important scene, and honestly, I think that a reader should be able to get that too. But he gets to have even more faith that this will be translated in the way that he wants because he knows that he's doing it. So we should probably announce next week's class, which unfortunately will be Avi's last one with us before Shabbos. How do you say it?
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
I'm a Sabbath observant Jew. I keep Shabbos, and that means that I have to be offline Friday night from sunset to Saturday night sundown. So the clock is shifting backwards, and very soon sunset will be in the sort of 4 o'clock area. So I'll have to take a break from these classes.
But
when you come back, you're going to come back with a vengeance, and you better have some good picks for us. So.
I'm gonna get my revenge.
Oh man, yeah.
Hey,
it's good.
You got John to watch Train to Busan. That's an accomplishment of some kind. That's
true.
I don't know.
And I mean, you got him to watch Bridget Jones' Diary, so.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment.
That's the accomplishment.
It took him 3 hours. It took him 3 hours to get through it.
So this next one is Adam's pick. So do you want to announce it?
Oh yeah. So the classic Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, Charlie Kaufman. It's great. Kate Winslet. You've got Jim Carrey giving a great dramatic performance. It's low stakes science fiction relationship story. It's interesting. Doesn't beat you over the head. And it also, more importantly, reads really well on the page. The screenplay is fantastic. I mean, all of Charlie Kaufman's screenplays are really, really good on the page. Although, it's interesting. His first drafts, which are very documented, very different. The original draft of Eternal Sunshine is a bummer. No spoilers. We'll talk about it next week. But
oh, man.
Oh, yeah, it's out there. And it's like, oh, my God.
I wonder which one I'm sending out. I think
we'll make sure the one that was got the Academy Award nomination, because they have to have a physical copy. That's
the bummer. Or that's the other one.
No, that's the one you want to put out.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
so curious. I'm so curious right now.
Yeah. Avi, look up the original ending and the book ending, and it's so crushingly depressing. But for those who haven't seen the movie, don't do that. Read the original screenplay that we're going to send out and watch the movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it, so I'm excited because this is one of them.
I'm surprised you haven't seen it. It's
I know.
One of the things that you would like, at least based on the other things you like.
I think I was too young when it came out.
Yeah, I'm going to be so curious, Alexia, to hear what you think about this one.
I have a feeling I'm going to like it. That's what my gut says, but who knows?
Elijah Wood is in it, and he's a piece of shit. And it's great. He plays a little sniveling asshole. It's wonderful.
You got Kirsten Dunst in there.
Oh, Kirsten Dunst. You've got Mark Ruffalo.
I love her.
You got David Cross is in it randomly.
Who's that?
David Cross is Tobias from Arrested Development.
I don't watch that show. Wait, no, I did watch a show. I did. I like him. Yeah,
never knew. Yeah, he's funny. He's great.
Mustache, right? Yeah.
He's also
He's blue.
Yeah.
And Michel Gondry is the director, and he's one of those really 1 in a million strange people. He does so many effects in this film that are in camera dramatically. So like he'd build like entire revolving sets with like body doubles to like achieve like something you could have done totally with like blue screens. And you got to respect that. Like there's a shot in the film where they go from a library to his bedroom and it's for real. It's fantastic.
So it's the pre-inception. This is what inspired Christopher Nolan. Fun fact.
Actually, if people are interested in like really unique visual, that kind of like sort of old school visual trickery, his music videos for like Daft Punk in the 90s and like a bunch of other artists are like really interesting. He's a very unique filmmaker. Unfortunately, he's a terrible writer. And every other film that he has written is just garbage. And Charlie, the best thing he ever did was this. So that's interesting.
Well, there you go. So yeah, this wraps up this week's coffee class on Short Term 12. Thank you a bunch for coming and for your engagement. If you want to get these scripts like the one that Adam is talking about for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and a link to, if we can find it streaming, we'll include the link there too, then you should check the link at the underneath this video. We have a little sign up and you'll get the script sent from us. And yeah, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to continue it, then also consider checking out our Discord community where we talk about movies and writing and everything like that all the time. That's also in the description. And yeah, we hope to see you in Discord and next week for Eternal Sunshine
of the Spotless Mind.
Of the Spotless Mind.
Of the Spotless Mind.
Look, it's a lot to say every time.
Eternal Michael G. Borden.
So that was like the worst thing I've ever done on the stream. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that was embarrassing.
It's legendary, is what it
Michael
is.
G. Borden. Borden's not even a name. Like
Lizzie Borden.
It should be.
Yeah,
Borden.
I was Borden, Lizzie Borden. That's what I thought you were talking about. That like murderous child, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Now I'm imagining Michael B. Jordan with an axe. Is Michael G. Borden?
Write the
Borden.
script.
Fine.
All right, cool.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Alexie, do you know what would make Short Term 12 better? It was on a train.
Oh my god.
In Korea.
In Korea. Make it on a train in Korea.
Quit ruining the things I love.
Just add zombies.
No.
Short Term Z.
Oh,
all right, let's end this stream. All right.
Bye.